In this video, we're going to take what we started in the first video and we're going to add a text input field to our game so that the user can start typing things and enter commands. We'll show you how to make this text input field, how to add this nice little caret to the beginning to indicate to a user that this is where you type, and we'll also show you how to import fonts into Godot so you can get nice fonts like this one that we have here to kind of give your game a certain aesthetic. Let's get started. So this is where we left off in the first video. We had our game scene, which had a background, it had a margin container, and then we had an area for our game info where we're going to get information back from the game and where our player was going to input their own text commands. Now, there's no functionality here right now. You can't do anything. And so the first thing we need to do is give the player a way to enter input. And that's what we're going to do right now. So fortunately, Godot has built-in nodes to help us do that. So I'm going to hit Command A or hit this plus button, whichever one works for you, to add a new node. And I'm going to look for LineEdit. And you'll see that LineEdit is a node that is a child of control. So it's another control node or a child of control node. It's a type of control node. And this LineEdit, it tells you right here what it does. It provides single line string editing, which is exactly what we want. We're making a text adventure game. We don't need multi-line editing. We just need a simple way for the user to enter some input. So I'm going to add this LineEdit here, and you'll see all of a sudden it's recolored our panel. And so what we can do now that I have this LineEdit, I'm going to call this input because this is what the user is going to input with. You'll see there's a bunch of properties on the right side here. We're going to deal with a fair amount of these over time, but for now what we want to do is come down to custom styles, and for normal we're going to hit new style box empty. And you'll see now that it is the same, our panel is the same color as our input area. And the reason for that is that when we say style box empty, it basically just removes all styling from our input area. And so it just kind of becomes this empty container. And so we're seeing the panel that exists underneath it. So if I save our game, now we can actually run our game. So I'm going to hit Command B, or you can hit this play button up here. And if I do that, we'll see that we need to select a main scene. So when you run your game or hit Command B, Godot needs a main scene so it knows which one to run. Because your game can be made up of many collections of nodes, many different scenes. You need to tell Godot which scene you actually want to run, which one is the main scene of your game. And so this, of course, is going to be our game node or our game scene. So I'm going to hit select, and I'm going to select our game scene. And now we have a main scene and Godot's going to run it. And here we go. I've got this big window that's popped up and it's our game. We've got our border here, we've got our info area, and we've got our input field. You'll notice that it's not focused by default. If I start typing, nothing happens. But if I click on it, now I can start typing. So I can say, hi, how are you doing? And we've got input all of a sudden. There's just a couple problems. One is that it's super small. And the other is that it's just kind of not, it doesn't really look right. It's butting up right against the edge. So there's a couple things we need to change. We need to get a bigger and better font. We need to style it a little bit differently. And it would be really nice if it was focused by default so the user could just type and didn't have to come down and click this. And we're going to fix all of those things right now. So if I close our game, I can just hit Command Q or quit. One thing that it will be helpful for me to show you is how you can affect when you run your game where Godot puts your running window. So you can actually adjust where Godot creates a window for your game to run. You saw there that it was full screen for me. I've had that from a previous setting, but if you come up to editor here and then hit editor settings, and then if you come down and scroll down through all this to run and find window placement. By the way, this menu here that you're seeing lets you change all of these settings for the editor. You can change text editor stuff, you can change interface, you can change so many different things. While we're here, one change that I recommend everyone doing is finding the text editor in the completion section here and enabling add type hints. It's off by default, but I recommend enabling it for everyone. What this does is it adds static type hints to all of your built-in functions that you autocomplete with. If you're looking for an explanation of why static types are important, I've got another video about how to use static types in Godot that's really helpful, I think, for beginners trying to learn GDScript. So I definitely recommend checking that video out if you have not. Anyway, so we've got our add type hints button selected here. But what we're really trying to come down here is run in window placement, because we want to change how our window is placed. So by default, it is centered. And this tries to center it on a screen. For me, with a Mac and an external monitor, this is very problematic. It does not actually center it. So I usually either set a custom position where I bump it, like I kind of manually adjust these numbers, or I've just defaulted to doing force maximize so that it'll try and maximize it. But we can just do centered, and I can change this to be, well, let's see, if I try centered and then I run this, you'll see that it starts, oh, it actually is centered. So that's good. So that should be good enough for us now. And now I've got a little bit more manageable of a screen size, and it looks a little bit better. And when I type, our font doesn't look as small, but we still want it to be bigger. So anyway, just a quick overview of how you can adjust where your window pops up. Okay, so there are a couple things we want to do. First, let us add our first script to our game. So in Godot, any single node can have one script attached to it. You can't attach multiple scripts to a node. But, and that's a little bit different than Unity per se, where you can have a game object that has multiple scripts or components attached. But it actually works under the hood. It's pretty much the same as Unity. So instead of having one object with a bunch of different scripts attached, you can have one node that has a bunch of child nodes with scripts attached. It's fundamentally the same thing. It's not less memory efficient. It's not less performant than it is in Unity. It's really doing the exact same thing. It's just you kind of have to refactor your thinking, where instead of one game object with a bunch of different properties like in Unity, you have a scene which has a parent node, and then, or a root node, and then children nodes that can have additional scripts and do additional things. It's actually a little bit easier, and you can get better division of your code. You can have more modular, abstracted, oftentimes nicer to use code by doing it the way that Godot tries to make you do it. Which isn't to say Unity's way is bad. I love Unity, it's where I got started, but Godot has a really, really awesome and flexible node and scene system that it runs on. So what we can do is add a script to our input here. And in order to do that, you can either right click and hit attach script, but what we're gonna do is you can also just hit this button up here, which is the quicker way. So I'll just select this and hit attach script. You'll see a couple things pop up. The first is language. So you can write scripts in NativeScript or VisualScript. NativeScript is the C++ under the hood that Godot is written in. VisualScript is a visual scripting language, so there's a graph that you can work with. I recommend learning GDScript if you have not already, but again, definitely check out the official Godot tutorial, the Making Your First Game, if you haven't, to get familiar with GDScript. So we're going to stick with GDScript, and you don't need to adjust any of these. The only thing you might adjust is the path. It'll automatically create a script with the same name as the node that you're attaching it to, and that's fine for us now. So I'll hit create, and now we've got a script. And so if I select in our scene tree any of our nodes, it'll bring us back out to the scene view, but I can also hit the script button to go into the script view. So you can go back and forth by using this. I generally don't do that. I usually just select around here, and if I want to go back to the script for this node, I'll just hit this little scroll button, and that'll take me to the script. So you can bump around by just clicking in the scene tree as well as up here. You'll find a workflow that works for you. So there's a couple things we want to do. The first thing we talked about is it would be really nice if we could just start typing when our game opened up instead of having to click here first. So if you're not familiar with that term, the word we're looking for is focus. One element can be focused on the screen at a time. And we want our text input to be automatically focused so we can just start typing. And Godot actually provides a way to do it. There's a function built into all control nodes called grab focus. And so what we can do is I'm going to get rid of a lot of this boilerplate. There's a lot of built-in Godot functions that you can learn. Ready is perhaps the most important of it. This function is called whenever a node enters the scene tree. So whenever a node is added to the scene tree and is visible in your game, this function is called right as that is happening. So this is generally where you're going to want to do a lot of the initialization for things. And so what we can do is, and certainly anything that shouldn't be done when the node is first created, but needs to happen when the node is actually in the tree, you want to put here. You don't want to do things that involve adjusting or touching something in the scene tree until ready. You don't want to do it before then. There's some functions that let you access the before when a node is created but not yet ready. Anyway, so what we can do here is say grab focus. you'll see that it's going to autocomplete this one for me because it's a built-in function that on the control node, and because LineEdit is it inherits from control, we're going to get that autocomplete. So I just call grab focus, and now whenever our node is ready, our input node, and our game runs, it's going to grab focus. So if I hit Command B to run our game, you'll see we can just start typing right away because it's grabbing that focus instantly. So this is perfect. That's exactly what we need. It's a super easy way to get our focus. Additionally, I'll comment more on this as we go, but I'm going to try and show you or write code that adheres to the GDScript style guide. You can really style your code in GDScript however you want. Godot doesn't force you to do anything except for certain syntax things like ending lines or statements with colons and tabbing. But there is a GDScript style guide that GDQuest and Nathan Lovato and some of the guys doing really awesome work on Godot's documentation have put together just as a common way to try and have nicely formatted GDScript code. I'll link to that in the description, but we're going to try and adhere to that as closely as you can. And part of that is having 2 lines between functions. So if I had another function, unlike in some languages where you just had 1 line and say like func x, GDScript actually recommends having 2 lines because it is a tab and indentation based language. And so we will stick to that as best as we can, but I'll get rid of this for now. So the next thing we want to do is actually get a better font. And in order to do that, we need to go outside of Godot because Godot only offers a single built-in font that you can't really adjust. And so what I'm going to do is actually go to Google Fonts. It's just fonts.google.com. I'll also link this below, and you can find it in the project folder or the project on GitHub if you just want to download it there. But I'm just going to find some monospaced font because I think it gives the vibe we're looking for with kind of a retro text adventure, and they're just, every character is the same width, so it just looks a little bit better for games like this. So what I'm going to do is I found just a random one, IBM Plex Mono. This is actually the font I use for most of my programming when I'm a software developer. But I'm going to hit download family here, and what we're going to do is it's actually just going to give me a zip file that I can download, and I'll show you how to import that into Godot. So here in my Godot window, I have opened up the zip file, and I know the font's kind of hard to see, but I can zoom in a bit, and you'll see there's just a bunch of different TTF, which is true type font files. These are the type of font files that Godot needs when you want to import a font. And we're going to be able to adjust the font size in Godot, but the font weight, whether it's bold, italic, or regular, etc., you're not really going to be able to do it. So we're going to drag 2 of these into our Godot file system. I'm going to grab the semi-bold, and I'm going to grab the regular. If you in your game think you want many different types, like you want italic fonts, go ahead and drag those in too. You can do whatever you want. But for my purposes in the tutorial, we're just going to have regular and semi-bold. So I'm going to select those 2, even if you can't see it very well. Just trust that these are those. And all I'm going to do is just drag them out of this folder right into the Godot window. So if I click on them and drag, I can drag them right into the file system in Godot, and they're going to get imported just like that. And we're good to go. Now, these are assets that are imported into Godot, but we can't actually use them yet. We have to create a font resource. And as a quick overview, resources are the fundamental they're a fundamental type of object in Godot. They are not nodes, so they're not visible in your scene, in your game, but they store data and tons of different stuff across all the nodes. Every node in Godot uses resources to some degree. So for example, earlier when we were setting our panel custom styles, this style box we created is a type of resource. A resource is a generic term, just like node is a generic parent class for all the different specific types of nodes. A resource is just a generic umbrella for all the different types of data containers and resources you can use in Godot. So a style box is a type of resource, and a font is a type of resource. So if I right click on the res folder down here, I'll see a new resource button. And what I'm going to do is search for fonts here, and I'm going to select the dynamic font. So dynamic fonts use the true type font asset types, that file type. And so I'm going to create one, and now I'm going to have this new font, and I'm going to call it Plex Mono, and we'll call it let's do 16. That'll be a base font for us. Additionally, in Godot, it's recommended that you use snake case for your naming for all resources and for a lot of classes as well. I pretty much use it exclusively. Sometimes for scripts and scenes, I will save it with uppercase because in Pascal case, because that's generally what Godot, the engine, defaults to. That might be the only way I go against the style guide, but we'll save all of our resources and other things in snake case like you see here. So plex underscore mono underscore 16. And now what I'm going to do is double click on our Plex Mono. And even though our Plex Mono resource isn't in our scene tree, if we double click it, the inspector tab over here on the right will open up to the Plex Mono 16 resource. So we can edit it over here, even though it's not in our scene itself. We just have to click it, double click it in the file system. So we want to open up this font tab. And here what we want to do is drag in the IBM Plex Mono regular as the font data. And now it's going to have that as our background font data. And then within the settings tab, we can change the size. We set this to be Plex Mono 16. So we're just going to keep it at that because that's correct. It's the default. In newer versions of Godot, and like Godot 4, you won't have to create separate resources for different font sizes, and you'll be able to use variable fonts within a single resource, which is going to be amazing. But for now, we're just going to create separate font sizes, separate resources for each font size and different boldness. And it's kind of a pain, but once you set it up once, you're good to go. So in order to organize this a little bit more, I'm going to do a new folder, and I'm just going to say fonts. And here I'm going to drag our base font files themselves and also our font resource. So just drag it in there. Okay. So now we've got custom fonts in our game that are going to be nice to use. So I can come into our input here, and I can actually come into custom fonts, and I can drag. You could click it here and do new dynamic font data or hit load. We don't need to do that though. We can just drag in our Plex Mono 16 to this font setting here. And this is a really nice thing about Godot, is that the editor is fully compatible with every other part of the editor. So we can just drag in this right into our node and it just works. It's really awesome. And so now if I come up to our text here and start typing, you'll see that we're using the IBM Plex Mono. So we're going to create another Plex Mono resource that's bigger, so it's a little easier to see. So I'm going to come over to our Plex Mono 16 font, and we're going to duplicate it. You can either right click and hit duplicate right here, or you can hit Command D or Control D. I'll just use the hotkey, and we're going to say 28. So this will be a size 28 font, and you'll see that it's inherited that same font data under the hood, but we'll change the settings here to be 28. And now if I come to our input and I drag in, or actually let's just start typing, so random stuff here, you'll see it's kind of small. But now if I drag in our Plex Mono 28, all of a sudden it'll get updated to be a little bigger, which is exactly what we want. And if I run our game now, you'll see that it's much easier to see and type. This is exactly what we want. The user can actually see it now. So this is going really well. Let me get rid of this text here. But now the only problem is that it's kind of weird that our input starts right at the beginning. There's a couple things we could do with that. We could add a little bit of margin here, but it'd kind of be nice if we gave an old school kind of text adventure feel to our game. So if we had like a caret that existed right here, that always kind of showed to the user, hey, this is where you enter input, that'd be kind of cool. So we're going to add that to our game. So if I come into our input area, I'm going to hit Command A to add something new, and I'm going to add a label. And a label is just your basic plain text. It just displays text on the string or on the screen. It's a string. You can edit it from code if you need, but it's very simple. And so I'm going to add an input or a label below our input. I'm going to call it caret. And so we can actually reorder things in the scene tree, and the order that children nodes are in of a parent will affect how they display. And so if I drag our caret to be above our input, it's going to display before our input when things are drawn. So it's going to be drawn underneath our input. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that our caret is always to the left of our input, because if I do space, I'm going to add a space to kind of add a very cheap way to do margins here. So space, right caret, and then space. And let me drag in our 28 font here. So this is going to work. The problem is that if I run our game now, we're going to be able to type over our caret, which we don't want. We only want our input field to start basically right here. So in order to do that, what we can do with our caret is actually make, as a child of our input area, an hbox container. And what we can do here is make our caret and input children of that container. And so now you'll see that this hbox container is going to automatically handle laying them out horizontally in columns for us. So we'll have our caret, and then our input comes after it. Now again, we want our input to take up the entirety of the space available to it. Since we added this container, it's not doing that anymore. So we need to manually tell it to do that. So we can do size flags, horizontal, expand, and we'll see that our input field is now taking up the entire space. So that was a really quick and easy way to get the functionality we were looking for. We just add this container, and all of a sudden it's taking care of the fact that we're trying to have a caret before our input field, and the two won't overlap anymore. So that's really nice. If I run our game, we shall see that all of a sudden we start here. We can't really go back or select the caret, but if I start typing, or if I go all the way back, it just starts and ends at the perfect spot. So this is really nice. One other thing we need to fix is the fact that if I just type a lot of characters, we're going to be able to input just an unlimited amount of stuff, which we don't really want. So if I select our input field here, and if I come up to the top, there is a max length property. And we'll set it to something like 48 for now and see how that feels. That's probably way longer than anything we'll need, but might as well give some space. So if I just start typing randomly, we should see after a while I can't type anymore. And the good news is that that 48 characters is before we get to the end of the line, which is exactly what we want. So you could bump it up a little bit so it pretty much lines up with the end of the line, but I think 48 is totally perfect for now. I mean, there's no way we're going to have a command that takes this much room to type, and if so, we can adjust it later on. So now we have an actual input field that the user can type input. We've got this nice little caret here kind of prompting the user to say, hey, this is where you type. And it's really nice too because it's focused by the beginning, so we can just start typing when our game opens up without having to click on it. One thing that would be nice to do is you might see this little blue focus box here. This comes by default on most OSs. It's just showing that this element is focused, but we don't really want that to show here. So we're going to get rid of it. I will make the note that for accessibility's sake, this is not always the best move to make. You should usually have easy ways to indicate to a user and to screen readers that a certain element is focused, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to get rid of that now. So in order to do that, I select our input again, come down to custom styles, and under this focus section here, I'm going to do style box empty, just like we did for normal. And what this is going to do is it's going to get rid of any additional styling when our element is in focus. So now, when I run our game, we'll see there's no blue box that appears around our input field. So everyone, there you have it. We've now added an input field to our game. We have this nice caret here that styles it, and the user is able to type input, and we have a limit to how much input they can type so that they can't just type way too much. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I hope this video has been helpful and you're finding this series enjoyable. If you are, a like and subscribe to support the channel is always appreciated. We'd love to have you in our Discord server. The link to that is in the description. You can ask any questions about the video or tutorials there. And if you find my work helpful, donating a coffee on Buy Me a Coffee, link also in the description, is always appreciated and helps me continue to make great tutorials. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.